This is the story of the battle to play sport on Sunday in Camberwell. My name's Sarah Craze and I'm a local historian here in Ashburton. What I'm about to tell you is the story of an ideological standoff between two very conservative and religious men. One was an Ashburton resident called W. Gordon Sprigg, and he was the honorary chair of the Sunday Observance Council. The other was Councillor Eric Raven, also a conservative man. Only one of these men believed in upholding the democratic rights of the people of Camberwell. And that's why one of these men has a reserve named after him and the other one has faded into obscurity. This story begins in Australia before the Second World War, when there was a widespread principle in place called Sunday Observance. This essentially meant Sundays were set aside for church and rest, unless you were a woman who still had to do all the cooking and cleaning up. This principle was entrenched in council bylaws that prohibited the use of council-owned green spaces for recreation and organised sport on Sundays. Now everyone knows that getting councils to change bylaws is no walk in the park. Nevertheless, after the war, a number of councils began bowing to pressure from their constituents to abolish the Sunday observance prohibitions. The primary reason for this was practical. People were ignoring them anyway, and not having toilet facilities open on council parks and recreation areas was creating a sanitary nightmare. This initiative arrived in Camberwell in 1947. Yet its highly conservative residents voted no to changing the bylaws. This result was representative of the views of one highly influential Ashburton man, W. Gordon Sprigg. As the honorary chair of the Sunday Observance Council, it was Sprigg's mission in life to ensure that not only should no one work for money on Sundays, nobody should do anything but go to church on Sunday. Fundraising for orphan children? No. Entertaining war veterans? No way. Thinking of having a friendly footy game on a Sunday? Not on your life. And I know all this because Sprigg was a prolific letter writer to the Age and Argus. So his seething resentment at the growing changes to Sunday observance is all there in black and white. As Melbourne councils all began to overturn their bylaws against sport on Sundays, Sprigg dug in. He made it his mission in life to ensure that nobody was elected to Camberwell Council who supported overturning the ban. For over a decade, he exerted his influence to ensure that despite a growing push for change and increasing levels of teenage delinquency on Sundays, that ban in Camberwell was going to be abolished over his dead body. Eventually, in 1959, it took a sustained campaign from the youth Christian workers, who were all boys, and local sporting clubs to push for a new referendum on the Sunday sport ban in Camberwell. They argued that vandalism and delinquency were at their worst on Sunday afternoons because Camberwell youth were not permitted to use their energy for healthy recreation. Sprigg's no advocates on council dragged their feet at the referendum, arguing over whether it should be a postal vote or a proper poll and whether it should cover non-commercial sport. Eventually, thanks in no small part to the advocacy of Councillor Eric Raven, the referendum went ahead. It came back with a 3-1 yes vote in favour of abolishing the ban. The sporting clubs rejoiced, but the result stunned the Camberwell councillors. Nobody saw it coming. You would think that such a resounding yes vote would be sufficient to overturn the bylaws, but you'd be dead wrong. 2 months later, the shocked council came back with their plan for how Sunday sport would work in Camberwell. Sunday sport could only be played in the afternoon between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m, so it did not interfere with church attendance. Not only that, but only the quiet sports of tennis and lawn bowls would be allowed to be played, and only every other week. Cricket could only be played on council reserves on one afternoon per month. Australian rules football, not at all. Now it was the turn of the sporting clubs of Camberwell to be shocked. As far as they were concerned, the referendum was a complete waste of time and money and a flouting of their democratic rights. They were furious. So was Gordon Sprigg. But he was rallying against the erosion of the proper observance of the Christian Sunday. By this time, even archbishops were on record saying they enjoyed a game of cricket on a Sunday. Enter Councillor Eric Raven. Much like all the other Camberwell councillors, Eric Raven was a conservative man. He was a Christian and a staunch supporter of the dry area bylaws. Elected to council in 1938, you may think that because he remained on council for over 30 years that he didn't like change, but it was his opinion that despite his deeply held religious views, what an individual did on Sunday was their personal choice. I suspect he surreptitiously encouraged various sporting clubs to lobby the council for the right to play on Sunday. Over the next 5 years, he would table their letters requesting to play, move a motion to have it read. It would then be seconded by his ally on council, Ashburton resident Neville Lee, only to be knocked back time and again by Sprigg's council men. It seemed the only way through really was to wait for Sprigg to die. And finally, in 1963, at the ripe old age of 93, he finally did. With Sprigg's stranglehold on council elections finally gone, now Councillor Raven had to wait for the sufficient churn to occur for new, more progressive men to be elected. In 1965, clutching the annual letter he received from Camberwell Football Club asking to play on Sunday, Raven finally managed to push through a small nudge to the bylaws against football. The club could now play on one Sunday a month. Meanwhile, the rule restricting tennis, golf and lawn bowls was also gradually loosening. By Camberwell Football Club's 1967 season, enough of a churn had occurred on council that Raven was finally able to push through permission for football to be played on Sundays. This was not a moment too soon, as the club was facing a serious threat for playing space from soccer. So next time you're passing the High Street exit of the Monash Freeway, have a look up the hill for the tall trees of the Eric Raven Reserve. And remember, it's thanks to him that 8 years after the people of Camberwell voted overwhelmingly in favour to play sport on Sundays, our democratic rights were finally upheld.